In the spring of 1960, a young astronomer named Frank Drake drove to a radio telescope in Green Bank, West Virginia, pointed it at two nearby stars, and waited. He had a notebook ready. He had colleagues who thought he might hear something within weeks. The math, after all, seemed to support optimism. The universe was enormous. It was old. The same chemistry that had produced life on Earth existed everywhere. If life appeared here, why not there? If intelligence appeared here, why not there too? The stars he was listening to were not so different from our own. Planets were almost certainly orbiting them. And if even a small fraction of those planets had produced something capable of building a radio transmitter, the galaxy should be humming with signals. Drake listened for 4 months. He heard nothing that could not be explained by physics alone. No pattern, no repetition, no signal buried in the noise that required a mind to explain it. He published his results and moved on. Other scientists took up the search. Better telescopes, better algorithms, better understanding of which frequencies an intelligent civilization might use to broadcast. The search expanded from 2 stars to thousands, then to entire regions of the sky, then to systematic surveys of the whole observable sky. Projects were funded and cancelled and restarted. The technology improved by orders of magnitude. What Drake could detect in 1960, modern instruments would laugh at. We are listening harder than we have ever listened. There was one moment, in August of 1977, that made everyone sit up. An astronomer named Jerry Eman was reviewing data from the Big Ear radio telescope at Ohio State University, scanning a printout of radio signals the telescope had recorded a few days earlier. He was going through columns of numbers, the kind of slow, methodical work that fills most of scientific life, when he saw something that stopped him cold. A signal that lasted 72 seconds, the maximum duration the telescope could record as the sky drifted through its field of view. A signal so strong and so structured that Eman circled it in red ink and wrote one word in the margin: "Wow." The WOW signal, as it became known, remains the strongest candidate for an extraterrestrial transmission ever detected. It came from the direction of the constellation Sagittarius. It had the characteristics that researchers had theorized an alien broadcast might have. It appeared once, and it has never been detected again, despite decades of follow-up observations pointing instruments at that same patch of sky. We do not know what caused it. We probably never will. Most researchers now suspect a natural explanation, a hydrogen cloud, a comet, interference of some kind. But for a moment, for one circled column of numbers on a printout in a university office in Ohio, it seemed possible that the silence had broken. It had not, and we have heard nothing, not one signal that survived rigorous scrutiny. Not one anomaly with no natural explanation. Not one pattern in the data that required something other than physics to produce. In over 60 years of increasingly sensitive searching across a widening range of frequencies and a growing number of targets, the universe has returned only silence. This should bother you more than it probably does, because the math has not changed. The universe contains somewhere between 100 and 400 billion stars in our galaxy alone. Estimates of the number of galaxies in the observable universe run to 2 trillion. Within the Milky Way, we now know, thanks to 2 decades of planet-hunting missions, that the majority of stars have planets, and that rocky planets in habitable zones are common. The numbers, by any reasonable calculation, suggest that life should be widespread. Intelligence should have appeared multiple times. Civilizations should exist, or should have existed, in sufficient numbers that at least some of them should be detectable. Frank Drake himself tried to quantify this in 1961, before he had even completed his first search. He wrote an equation on a blackboard, now known as the Drake equation, that laid out every factor required to estimate the number of communicating civilizations in the galaxy. The rate of star formation, the fraction of stars with planets, the fraction of those planets that could support life, the fraction where life actually appears, the fraction where life develops intelligence, the fraction where intelligence develops detectable technology, and the average lifespan of such a civilization before it goes silent. Multiply those fractions together and you get a number. The problem is that almost none of those fractions are known with any confidence. Plug in optimistic values and the galaxy should be buzzing with civilizations. Plug in pessimistic values and we might be alone. The equation is not so much a calculation as a structured way of cataloging our ignorance. It tells us exactly what we do not know, and it tells us that what we do not know is almost everything that matters. And Frank Drake's notebook is still empty. This is the Fermi Paradox, named for the physicist Enrico Fermi, who raised the question over lunch in 1950 with a simplicity that belied its depth. He was talking with colleagues about the possibility of extraterrestrial life, and he looked up from his food and asked, "Where is everybody?" It sounds almost like a joke. It is not a joke. It is one of the deepest questions in science, and it has no clean answer. Where are they? Where are the signals, the megastructures, the probes, the accidental leakage of 1 billion years of alien television? Where is any sign at all that intelligence has appeared somewhere else in 13 billion years of cosmic history? The silence is not just strange. It is structurally strange. The universe had every opportunity. It had time measured in billions of years. It had raw materials scattered across 2 trillion galaxies. It had chemistry that tends, under the right conditions, toward complexity. And yet, from everything we can observe, the universe appears to contain exactly one thing capable of noticing that it exists: us. And maybe that is the most important word in that sentence. Maybe. Because the question we are really asking, when we sit with the Fermi Paradox long enough to feel its full weight, is not a question about aliens. It is a question about what we are. About whether the thing that makes a human being drive to a radio telescope in West Virginia and point it at the stars because they genuinely believe they might hear something. Whether that impulse, that curiosity, that reaching outward into the dark is something the universe produces readily, or whether it is something it almost never manages to produce at all. Whether we are, in any meaningful sense, alone. That question is what we are going to spend the next hour inside of. And I want to warn you, there is no resolution waiting at the end. The honest answers to this question are all, in different ways, difficult to sit with. But the question itself might be the most important thing our species has ever asked. Because the answer, whatever it is, changes everything about how we understand ourselves and what we owe to our own existence. Before we can ask whether we are the most intelligent species in the universe, we have to answer a harder question first. What does intelligent actually mean? We use the word as if everyone agrees on its definition. We apply it to people, to animals, to software, to civilizations we have never met. But intelligence is one of those concepts that gets slippery the moment you push on it. And that slipperiness matters enormously here. Because the way you define intelligence determines what you look for out there, and it shapes the conclusions you draw when you find nothing. So let us start on this planet, with the only intelligence we can study directly. In 2009, researchers at Cambridge University gave a group of rooks, birds related to crows, a transparent tube filled with water. Floating inside the tube, just out of reach, was a piece of food. Sitting nearby were small stones. The birds had never seen this setup before. They had no training, no demonstration, no instruction. Within minutes, several of them picked up the stones and began dropping them into the tube, one by one. They watched the water level rise. They kept going. When the food floated within reach, they ate it. They had worked out the physics of water displacement on the spot, independently, from scratch. Aesop wrote a fable about a crow doing exactly this more than 2,000 years ago. For most of that time, scientists assumed it was a moral tale, not a behavioral observation. It was not a moral tale. Aesop watched crows. Now, consider the octopus. An octopus navigates mazes it has never entered. It unscrews child-proof jars to access food inside. It has been observed carrying coconut shell halves across the ocean floor. Not to eat, not to mate with, but to store and use as portable shelter later. It is anticipating a future need and acting in the present to address it. That is mental time travel. That is planning. And it is happening in an animal whose nervous system is organized so differently from ours that the two cannot be more distantly related while still being animals. The last common ancestor of a human and an octopus was a simple flatworm that lived more than 500 million years ago. Intelligence, in the octopus, evolved completely independently from intelligence in us. Two paths through the wilderness, ending at something that looks remarkably similar from certain angles. Dolphins have individual names. Each animal develops a unique signature whistle early in life, and other dolphins use that whistle to refer to them, even when the named individual is not present. They are communicating about absent individuals using arbitrary symbols. That is abstraction. That is the first step toward language in its deepest sense. The ability to hold a concept of a specific individual in the mind and share that concept with someone else symbolically. Chimpanzees learn hundreds of symbolic tokens and use them to communicate with researchers with a flexibility that surprised everyone who studied it. They understand cause and effect. They engage in political coalition building, remembering who helped them and returning favors. They comfort each other after conflict. They mourn their dead in ways that are difficult to watch without feeling something. And chimpanzees in the wild have been observed doing something that no one quite has a clean explanation for. They sit at waterfalls, not to drink, not to hunt. They sit and watch the cascade of falling water and sometimes display behaviors, swaying and vocalizing, and a kind of agitation that researchers have struggled to categorize. One primatologist, Jane Goodall, said that watching a chimpanzee at a waterfall made her wonder whether they were experiencing something like awe, something like the beginning of a question they had no language yet to ask. There is something quietly wonderful about that image. A chimpanzee sitting in the rainforest, watching waterfall, feeling something it cannot name. It is not so different from a person lying in the dark, watching the stars, feeling something they are only just beginning to put into words. The capacity for wonder may not begin with us. It may have been building, slowly, across millions of years of primate evolution, long before language gave us a way to do anything with it. The point of all of this is not that animals are smarter than we think, though they often are. The point is that intelligence is not a single, unified thing sitting on a linear scale with us at the top. It is a collection of capacities: problem solving, social cognition, tool use, communication, planning, self-awareness, abstraction, and different creatures have different versions of these capacities, developed to different degrees, shaped by the specific pressures of their environments. The crow and the octopus and the dolphin are not less intelligent than us. They are intelligent in different ways, for different purposes, in different registers. So what exactly sets us apart? Not raw cognitive power alone. A crow solving a water displacement problem on first contact is demonstrating genuine sophistication. An octopus planning for a future shelter need is doing something cognitively remarkable. The gap between those animals and a human being is real, but it is not the gap we usually imagine. We are not a different category of thing. We are something that grew out of the same basic biological substrate, the same evolutionary pressures, the same neural architecture that produced the rest of the animal kingdom. What is genuinely different is what we do with our intelligence across time. A crow is brilliant, but crow knowledge does not reliably compound across generations. Each generation of crows begins more or less where the last one began. There is some cultural transmission in certain animal populations, specific behaviors learned and passed on within communities rather than through genes. Some populations of chimpanzees use tools that others do not, and young chimps learn by watching their elders. But this transmission is narrow, fragile, and slow. It does not accelerate. It does not build on itself in ways that produce exponentially growing capability. Human beings built something different. We built the capacity to externalize knowledge, to store it outside our own bodies, in forms that persist after we die and can be accessed and extended by people who were not yet born when the knowledge was created. We did this first in stories, carrying the accumulated wisdom of generations in a form that could be memorized and retold. Then in symbols scratched into clay and bone. Then in writing, which made knowledge not just transmissible but permanent. Then in printing, which made it not just permanent but widely available. Then in the connected digital networks that now hold the recorded thought of every human civilization in accessible form. This is cumulative culture, and it is the mechanism by which we became what we are. Isaac Newton wrote that he saw further by standing on the shoulders of giants. What he meant was that the work of Galileo and Kepler and those before them had not died with them. It was written down, it was preserved. He could read it, build on it, extend it, and write down his own work in a form that others could build on after him. A physicist alive today inherits not just Newton's work, but everything that has come since. They do not need to rediscover calculus or electromagnetism or quantum mechanics or relativity from scratch. The accumulated cognitive labor of every scientist who ever lived waits for them in books and papers and databases, and they can take it as their starting point. This is why we went from stone tools to radio telescopes in 100,000 years, which is nothing in evolutionary terms, while crows, who are genuinely intelligent animals, have been using sticks to extract insects from bark for millions of years and are still doing exactly that. The crow is not failing. The crow's intelligence is stable and sufficient for the crow's life. But it is not compounding. It is not accelerating. It is not building towards something beyond itself. Ours is. And the compounding is accelerating. The distance between what Newton knew and what a physicist knows today is larger than the distance between the first stone tool and Newton. The distance between what we know today and what humanity will know in 200 years, if we survive to know anything, may be larger still. We are not just accumulating knowledge, we are accumulating it faster and faster, each generation standing on a taller platform than the last. That trajectory is, as far as we know, something that has never existed before on this planet, and may never have existed anywhere else in the universe. Or it may be something that appears whenever intelligence appears, a natural consequence of language and memory and the desire to understand. The Fermi Paradox does not tell us which. It just asks why, if the second is true, we cannot find anyone else who made it this far. And yet here is the tension at the center of this question, the one we need to hold in mind as we look outward. We define intelligence using ourselves as the benchmark. When we ask whether something is intelligent, we are asking whether it does things in ways that we recognize as intelligent, ways that resemble what we do or what we aspire to do. Our definition is a mirror, and mirrors only show you one thing. An octopus solving a problem does not look like a human solving a problem. If you did not already know to look for intelligence in an octopus, if you were simply observing one in its tank without prior expectation, you might easily miss what was happening. You would see an animal reacting to its environment. You would not necessarily see a mind working. This matters enormously for the search for intelligence beyond Earth. When we imagine what alien intelligence might look like, we almost invariably imagine something that thinks roughly the way we think. That communicates in ways we could, with sufficient effort, decode. That builds things we would recognize as built. That would find us interesting in more or less the way we find each other interesting. But there is no reason the universe should produce alien intelligence in our image. An intelligence that evolved in a completely different environment, under completely different selective pressures, over a completely different time scale, might be so different from us that we would not recognize it as intelligent at all. It might process information in ways that have no human analogy. It might perceive the world through senses we do not have and cannot simulate. It might communicate in modes that look to us indistinguishable from natural phenomena. We might look straight at it and see nothing remarkable, or we might have already. Think about what we consider a signature of intelligence when we search the sky. Radio signals with a repeating mathematical pattern, structures that alter the light output of a star in ways that natural physics cannot explain. Atmospheric chemistry on a distant planet that suggests industrial activity. All of these are things that a civilization like ours would produce. A civilization that discovered electromagnetism, built radio transmitters, constructed large physical structures, and developed industrial chemistry in roughly the same order we did. But an intelligence that took a completely different path, one that never developed radio, that built inward rather than outward, that exists at a biological scale we would mistake for ecosystem rather than civilization, or at a computational scale we would mistake for natural electromagnetic phenomena, would leave none of those signatures. We would scan the sky and see nothing, not because nothing was there, but because nothing we were looking for was there. The philosopher Thomas Nagel once asked what it is like to be a bat. Bats perceive the world primarily through echolocation, a sense that has no real human equivalent. We can describe the physics of echolocation perfectly well. What we cannot do is actually experience the world the way a bat experiences it. The subjective texture of bat perception is, Nagel argued, genuinely inaccessible to human minds. If we cannot fully imagine what it is like to be a bat, an animal that lives in our world, uses the same basic mammalian biology, shares our planet, imagining what it is like to be an intelligence that evolved under completely different conditions, on a completely different world, over billions of years, may be beyond us entirely. This is the uncomfortable possibility that sits beneath the Fermi Paradox. Not that the universe is empty, but that we may be looking for the wrong thing, measuring the cosmos against a human-shaped ruler and concluding falsely that nothing measures up. So let us follow the question as far as the evidence takes us. Somewhere between the first self-replicating molecule and a civilization capable of crossing interstellar space, there is a wall. We do not know exactly where it stands. We do not know how high it is or how thick. We cannot see it directly, but we know it is there. Because if it were not, The galaxy would be loud with civilizations that had crossed it, and the galaxy is the quietest place we know. Robin Hanson, an economist and researcher at George Mason University, named this wall in 1998. He called it the Great Filter. The logic is simple and devastating. Getting from dead matter to a spacefaring civilization requires crossing a series of steps, each one dependent on the last, the origin of life. The development of cells complex enough to store and use large amounts of genetic information. The emergence of multicellular organisms. The evolution of nervous systems, the appearance of intelligence, language, technology, and ultimately the capability to leave the home planet. Each of these steps must be crossed to reach the next. And at least one of them, probably more, is so improbable that almost nothing ever makes it through. Something is filtering civilizations out of existence before they become detectable. The question is where the filter is located in the sequence. Because the answer to that question has entirely different implications depending on which side of it we are on. If the filter is behind us, if the improbable step is somewhere in our past, then we are among the rare things in the universe that crossed it. The silence makes sense. Not because intelligence is impossible, but because the road to intelligence is almost impossibly narrow, and we happen to walk it. We are on the far side. The danger is behind us. If the filter is ahead of us, if the hard part is not producing intelligence but sustaining it, then the silence is a warning. Other civilizations rose. They reached the level we are at now, or close to it. And then something happened. Something that tends to happen. And we are approaching the same threshold. The most hopeful version of our future is the one where the filter is already behind us. So let us look at where it might be hiding. The first candidate is the origin of life itself. 4 billion years ago, on a planet of bare rock and shallow ocean, something happened. A molecule formed that could copy itself. That event, spontaneous, unguided, chemistry crossing the threshold into biology, is the most important event in the history of this planet and possibly in the history of the universe. And we still do not know how it happened. We have hypotheses. The RNA world hypothesis suggests that RNA, which can both store genetic information and act as a catalyst for chemical reactions, may have been the first self-replicating molecule. Experiments have shown that RNA can form spontaneously under certain conditions. But the jump from forming spontaneously to replicating reliably to evolving complexity is still not something we have been able to reproduce in a laboratory from scratch. The exact conditions required, the probability of the event occurring in any given window of time, the sensitivity of the outcome to variations in chemistry or temperature or geology, all of this remains uncertain. We have one data point. Life appeared on Earth, and it appeared relatively quickly after the planet cooled enough to support liquid water. Some researchers take this as a sign that the origin of life is easy, that given the right conditions, it happens readily. Others point out that a single data point tells you almost nothing statistically, and that our existence guarantees we are on a planet where life originated, regardless of how rare that event is. We cannot use our own existence to estimate how common our existence is. The second candidate for the filter is a step that occurred roughly 2 billion years into the history of life on Earth, and which may be the most consequential biological event since life itself began. For nearly 2 billion years, everything alive on this planet was a prokaryote. Simple, single-celled organisms with no distinct nucleus, no internal membrane structures, no division of labor within the cell. They were extraordinarily successful. They colonized every available environment. They invented photosynthesis, which transformed the atmosphere of the planet. They were, by any measure, thriving. But they were simple. 2 billion years of life, and nothing more complex than a bacterium. Then, in an event that appears to have happened exactly once in 4 billion years of Earth's history, one bacterium entered another. Instead of being destroyed, it survived inside its host. It integrated. Over millions of generations, it lost the ability to live independently, and it became a permanent resident, performing the function of energy production in exchange for the resources of the host cell. It became the mitochondria. Every complex cell in your body contains the descendants of that one ancient merger. Every plant, every animal, every fungus on Earth traces its cellular architecture back to that single event. If this event is as rare as its frequency suggests, once in 4 billion years on a planet teeming with life, then the universe is probably full of worlds stuck at bacteria. Simple life everywhere. Everything above that, almost nowhere. Simple microbial life distributed widely. Everything above that, almost nowhere. The third candidate is everything else. The full combination of conditions required to produce technological intelligence. This is where the rare earth argument does its heaviest work. In 2000, the scientists Peter Ward and Donald Brownlee published a book arguing that the conditions required to produce not just life, but complex life, and ultimately intelligent life, are so specific and so improbable that Earth may be very close to unique in the observable universe. Not unique in having life, unique in having intelligence. Think about what Earth has that most planets do not. We orbit a stable, middle-aged star. Many stars, particularly the red dwarfs that make up the majority of stars in the galaxy, emit unpredictable bursts of radiation powerful enough to strip away atmospheres and sterilize planetary surfaces. Our star is unusually well behaved. It has maintained a relatively steady output for billions of years, giving lifetime to evolve without being periodically reset. We have a moon that is enormous relative to our planet. The moon almost certainly formed from the debris of a catastrophic collision early in Earth's history. A collision so specific in its geometry that it is unlikely to be common. And that moon stabilizes Earth's axial tilt, preventing the kind of chaotic wobbling that would bring violent, unpredictable climate swings on timescales of tens of thousands of years. A planet without this stabilization faces conditions that may not allow complex life to gain a persistent foothold. Jupiter, orbiting far out in our solar system, acts as a gravitational shield. Its mass captures or deflects a significant fraction of the asteroids and comets that would otherwise impact Earth more frequently. Frequent large impacts are catastrophic for complex life. A world without its own gravitational shield faces a much more violent history. We have plate tectonics, the movement of Earth's crustal plates driven by internal heat cycles carbon through the system over geological time, acting as a thermostat for the planet's temperature. Without this carbon cycle, planets tend toward one of two extremes: a runaway greenhouse state, like Venus, or a permanent freeze. Plate tectonics requires a specific internal composition and heat budget that many rocky worlds probably lack. We have a global magnetic field generated by the movement of liquid iron in our outer core. This field deflects the solar wind and protects our atmosphere from being gradually eroded. Mars lost its magnetic field billions of years ago and subsequently lost most of its atmosphere. Without our magnetic field, Earth's atmosphere would have followed the same fate. Each of these factors is, perhaps, not unique to Earth in isolation, but all of them together, persisting for long enough that intelligence could emerge through the slow process of evolution, the probability becomes very small indeed. And there is another layer to this argument that rarely gets discussed, which is the role of mass extinctions in shaping the kind of intelligence that eventually appeared here. Earth has experienced 5 major mass extinction events in its history. The most famous is the one 66 million years ago when an asteroid roughly 6 miles wide struck what is now the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico, triggering fires and a years-long winter that killed roughly 3/4 of all species on the planet. The dinosaurs, which had dominated terrestrial ecosystems for over 160 million years, were wiped out almost entirely. The mammals, which had been small and nocturnal and largely insignificant for most of that time, survived. That event is why we exist. Without that impact, the dinosaurs would likely have continued to dominate terrestrial environments. The ecological space that mammals eventually occupied, the space that allowed them to diversify, grow larger, develop complex social structures, and eventually produce primates and then us, would not have opened up. An asteroid of that size hitting at that precise location, at that precise angle, releasing that precise amount of energy, triggering the precise chain of events that followed, is not obviously a common occurrence. It required a particular rock from a particular part of the solar system to arrive at a particular moment in Earth's history. And that is just one of the 5 extinctions. Each of the others also shaped, in ways that are difficult to fully trace, the specific lineage that eventually produced us. The chain that led to human intelligence is not just a chain of lucky conditions. It is a chain of lucky disasters, each one devastating in the moment and improbable in its specific character, each one clearing space for something that would not otherwise have existed. The probability of all of that happening on any given planet, in any given order, producing any particular outcome, including an outcome capable of asking questions about it, is not a number that inspires confidence. And then consider the timing. Life appeared on Earth roughly 4 billion years ago. Complex, technological intelligence appeared perhaps 200,000 years ago. Civilization perhaps 10,000 years ago. That means life existed on this planet for more than 99.9% of its habitable window before anything like us showed up. We arrived at the very end. The sun will begin to brighten significantly in roughly 500 million years, initiating a process that will eventually boil the oceans and end the window of habitability. We got here just in time. That does not feel like inevitability. It feels like an extremely close call that very nearly did not happen. If the emergence of intelligence on Earth required this specific set of circumstances, all aligned for this specific duration, then looking out across the trillions of planets in the observable universe, the fraction that meet all of these conditions simultaneously may be vanishingly small. The universe may be populated overwhelmingly by dead worlds, and worlds with simple microbial life, and worlds where complex multicellular life arose, but never produced anything capable of asking questions. The numbers begin to make a different kind of sense. Not because the universe is empty, but because what we are may be extraordinarily rare. Intelligence is not the default outcome of biology. It may be a fluke, one particular branch on a tree that grows in 1,000 other directions on almost every other world. Most of those worlds are not failures. They are simply not us. Life found a way on them and kept going, bacteria and algae and perhaps something like animals. And that was enough. That was, by any biological measure, a success. We are the exception. The question the Fermi Paradox forces is whether we are the exception because the filter is behind us, or because it is still ahead. Or, and this is the darker possibility, we have not yet reached the hardest part. Let us set the rare Earth argument aside for a moment and be generous. Let us assume that the filter is not behind us, that intelligence is not extraordinarily rare, that across the galaxy, civilizations have risen before ours, some of them millions of years before ours, and that at least some of them survived long enough to develop the capacity to travel or communicate across interstellar distances. Where are they? Here is the number that makes this so hard to shake. A civilization expanding outward from its home star at just 1% of the speed of light, far below what might be achievable with technology that is physically plausible, even if far beyond what we can currently build, would take roughly 13,000 years to reach the nearest stars. From there, new settlements could send out further expeditions. The expansion front moves outward at the same pace, patient, methodical, requiring no exotic physics, just time and the will to continue. At that rate, a civilization could colonize every star system in the Milky Way galaxy in somewhere between 5 and 10 million years. The Milky Way is 13 billion years old. If even one civilization developed this capability 10 million years ago, which is nothing on cosmic timescales, less than 0.1% of the galaxy's age, the galaxy should already be saturated. Every star system visited, every habitable world either colonized or at least surveyed, every corner of the galaxy marked in some way by the presence of intelligence. And we see none of that. Not one Dyson sphere, the theoretical structure that would wrap around a star and capture its total energy output, which would be visible across the galaxy and which a sufficiently advanced civilization might build. Not one megastructure of any kind. Not one region of the sky where the light curves in ways that cannot be explained by natural astrophysics. Not one signal, deliberate or accidental, that requires a transmitter to explain. The galaxy has had 1,300 windows of 10 million years each. 1,300 opportunities for a civilization to emerge, expand, and become impossible to miss. We have missed nothing. Something is stopping them. And the candidate explanations are each, in their own way, uncomfortable. The first is that they are here, and we cannot see them. The zoo hypothesis proposes that advanced civilizations exist. They know we are here, and they have agreed among themselves to observe without interfering. A kind of cosmic quarantine. Young civilizations are left to develop without outside contact until they reach some threshold of maturity, at which point the larger community introduces itself. The silence is not absence, it is patience. This is the most reassuring of the explanations. Someone is watching. Someone cares enough to manage the situation carefully. But the logic buckles under examination. For this to work, every civilization with the capability to contact us would have to agree to the same policy and maintain it, without exception, over millions of years. No faction breaks ranks. No individual dissident decides the policy is wrong. No civilization that independently reaches the same technological level refuses to participate. The discipline required is extraordinary, not just for one civilization, but for every civilization that has ever existed in the detectable universe. It is difficult to imagine any policy being maintained that perfectly for that long, across that many independent actors. The second explanation is colder. The dark forest hypothesis, articulated with chilling precision by the Chinese author Liu Cixin, proposes that the universe is silent because it is dangerous, and because every civilization capable of reason eventually understands this. Any civilization that reveals its location risks attracting attention from something older, more powerful, and with no particular reason to be generous. Resources are finite across long timescales. The intentions of an unknown civilization cannot be verified with certainty. And a civilization advanced enough to reach you across interstellar distances is, almost by definition, advanced enough to destroy you if it decides to. The rational strategy, under these assumptions, is silence. Absolute silence. Listen, but do not transmit. Locate others if possible, but do not reveal yourself. The galaxy becomes a forest in the dark, full of hunters and prey, all of them holding their breath. Liu Cixin's logic is cold and exact. Two civilizations that encounter each other face a fundamental problem. They cannot know with certainty whether the other is friendly. They can communicate, but communication across interstellar distances takes years or centuries. In that time, a civilization that seems friendly might develop in ways that make it dangerous. The only safe assumption, if survival is the priority, is caution. And the safest expression of caution, if you have the capability, is to eliminate a potential threat before it can grow into an actual one. This does not require malice. It requires only the arithmetic of survival under conditions of radical uncertainty applied by minds that have had millions of years to think it through. The silence in this reading is not peaceful. It is the silence of everyone holding a weapon and hoping not to be noticed first. If this is true, then our own behavior has been catastrophically naive. Our radio and television signals have been leaking into space since the early 20th century. A sphere of electromagnetic noise, now roughly 120 light-years in radius, surrounds our solar system and announces to anyone listening within that radius that something technological happened here. We cannot take it back. We cannot make ourselves quiet retroactively. The signal is already out there, spreading at the speed of light toward whatever is in range. Whether anything is listening and what it decides to do with what it hears is not something we can know or control. The third explanation is the one that requires us to look most honestly at ourselves. Maybe the silence is caused by what civilizations do to themselves. Not necessarily through war, though war is one path. Through the simpler, more structural problem of what intelligence tends to produce and what the things intelligence produces tend to do. Consider the arc of our own civilization over the last century. In 1945, we detonated the first nuclear weapon in the New Mexico desert and discovered that we were now capable of ending human civilization. We had this capability before we had any serious framework for deciding how to manage it responsibly. Within decades, we had built enough warheads to kill every human being on Earth many times over, distributed them across multiple nations with competing interests, and very nearly used them on several occasions that most people are not fully aware of. The Cuban Missile Crisis is the famous near miss. There were others, quieter, less documented, just as close. We got through it. So far, a combination of decision-making, luck, and the specific temperament of individuals in specific rooms at specific moments kept the worst from happening. It is not obvious that wisdom was the primary factor. One of those moments occurred in October of 1962, during the Cuban Missile Crisis, aboard a Soviet submarine called B-59. The submarine had lost contact with Moscow and did not know whether a war had already started. American destroyers were dropping depth charges nearby, not to destroy the submarine, but as signals to surface, a protocol the submarine's crew did not know about. Inside the vessel, officers believed they might be under attack. The submarine was armed with a nuclear torpedo, Under Soviet protocol at the time, launching required the agreement of 3 officers. 2 of them agreed to launch. The third, a senior officer named Vasily Arkhipov, refused. He argued against it. He held the other 2 off. The torpedo was not fired. The submarine eventually surfaced. The crisis passed. One man, in one submarine, with a headache and no sleep and no communication with the outside world, made a decision that may have prevented a nuclear exchange. The margin between the history we have and the history we could have had was, in that moment, a single person's judgment. This is what navigating the filter looks like from the inside. Not grand institutional wisdom. Individual decisions under pressure made with incomplete information, with consequences that cannot be fully understood at the time. We survived that one. The question the Fermi Paradox forces us to ask is whether surviving it is typical or whether we were an exception. And the technological pressures do not stop with nuclear weapons. Synthetic biology is advancing at a pace that may soon put the ability to engineer dangerous pathogens within reach of small groups and eventually individuals. Artificial intelligence is developing faster than our institutional ability to understand its long-term behavior or align its goals reliably with human values. The climate systems that agriculture and civilization depend on are being destabilized by industrial activity on a scale and timeline that our political systems were not designed to address. None of these are certain catastrophes. We may navigate all of them. Humans have, throughout history, developed the ability to cause enormous harm, and then developed social and political structures to constrain that ability. The arc is not inevitably downward, but the Fermi Paradox invites us to ask a population-level question, not an individual one. Not whether we will navigate these pressures, but whether technological civilizations in general tend to navigate them. What is the typical outcome? Because if intelligence reliably produces technology, and technology reliably outpaces the wisdom required to manage it, then the great filter may not be in the past at all. It may be the gap between becoming powerful and becoming wise. And every civilization that develops intelligence walks toward that same gap. But there is a version of this that goes even deeper. What if intelligence, in the long run, is simply not a stable evolutionary strategy? We tend to assume it is, because here we are. We are intelligent, and we are, in some narrow sense, thriving. But we have been a technological civilization for 10,000 years. We have been on this planet for the geological equivalent of a split second. In that split second, we have altered the chemistry of the atmosphere, acidified the oceans, driven thousands of species to extinction, and filled every environment on Earth with the evidence of our presence. We are the most disruptive force to hit this planet in 66 million years. Bacteria, meanwhile, have been here for 4 billion years. They will almost certainly be here 4 billion years from now, long after whatever we become or fail to become. They do not reshape their environment beyond their immediate metabolic needs. They do not accumulate weapons. They do not build technologies that outpace their own understanding. Simple life is extraordinarily good at persisting. Intelligence, with all its capability and ambition and tendency to create problems as fast as it solves them, may be less stable than it appears from the inside. It may be, on long enough timescales, a strategy that tends to burn through its substrate. The question we cannot answer from inside the experiment is whether we are the rare exception or whether we are simply at the same point every civilization reaches, the point where capability runs ahead of wisdom, where the tools get bigger faster than the judgment required to use them carefully. Every civilization that developed intelligence probably had its version of Vasily Arkhipov. The question is, how many of them had him in the right room at the right moment? We have followed the logic as far as it goes. We have looked at what intelligence is, where it came from, the improbable chain of events that produced it here, and what that chain implies about how common it might be elsewhere. We have looked at every serious explanation for the silence. None of them resolved it. All of them changed the shape of it. Now we sit with what we found. There are three possibilities. The first is that we are alone. Not alone in the sense that the universe contains no other life. The universe is almost certainly too vast and too old for the chemistry that produced life on Earth to have assembled itself into something self-replicating only once. Simple life, single-celled, microbial, tenacious, unassuming, may be spread across the galaxy in the oceans beneath the ice of distant moons, in the subsurface rock of worlds warmed by geological heat, perhaps even drifting in the upper atmospheres of gas giants in forms we have not yet imagined. Life as a chemical phenomenon may be common, but minds, things that wonder, things that accumulate knowledge and build on it, and ask questions about the universe they are embedded in, and feel the particular kind of longing that comes from looking at the stars and not knowing what is there. Those may have appeared only once. The filter, wherever it is, may be high enough that intelligence has crossed it once in the observable universe, here, on this specific world, orbiting this specific star, in this specific corner of a galaxy that is itself one among 2 trillion. If this is true, the implications are staggering. Every piece of music ever written, every scientific discovery, from the laws of motion to the structure of DNA to the existence of gravitational waves, predicted a century before we could measure them. Every painting that has survived its painter, every conversation between 2 people who love each other about something that does not matter and is therefore precious. Every moment of grief at the loss of something irreplaceable, and every moment of joy at the existence of something beautiful. All of it exists only here. Only because of a chain of contingencies stretching back 4 billion years, any one of which could have broken differently. And there is no backup, no other repository, no parallel record being kept by another civilization on the other side of the galaxy. If we fail, if we destroy ourselves through war or accident or simple institutional inability to manage the forces we have unleashed, the universe loses the only thing that has ever looked at it and understood any part of what it was seeing. Consider what that means in concrete terms. Every language ever spoken, every mathematical theorem ever proved, every map ever drawn of the night sky, every story ever told around a fire before writing existed. The accumulated record of what it felt like to be a human being across 100,000 years. The fear and the wonder and the grief and the humor and the love and the confusion, all of it is here and only here. And it is not guaranteed to persist. The dinosaurs were the dominant form of complex life on this planet for over 160 million years. They left no record of what it was like to be them. No art, no mathematics, no accumulated wisdom. Not because they lacked something essential as living creatures, but because they never developed the capacity to externalize and preserve experience. When they were gone completely. And the universe did not notice in any way that 160 million years of evolutionary history had been erased. We have built the capacity to notice. We have built the capacity to record. Whether we have built the wisdom to survive long enough for that record to matter is the open question. That is not a small thing to carry, but it may be the weight we are carrying, whether we know it or not. The second possibility is that we are early. The universe is 13.8 billion years old, but on the timescale that complex life requires, it may still be very young. The heavy elements needed to build rocky planets like Earth are produced inside stars and dispersed when those stars die. Earlier generations of stars were deficient in these elements. The conditions for producing Earth-like planets have become more favorable over time, as successive generations of stars have enriched the galaxy with the raw materials for complexity. In this version of the story, we are not unique, but we are among the first. Other civilizations exist or are beginning to form, but they are young too. They are small and quiet, each one on its own world, looking up at its own sky and hearing the same silence we hear. We are contemporaries separated by distances so vast that signals traveling at the speed of light will take millions of years to cross them. The community we might one day belong to exists, but it is not yet interconnected. It is a galaxy of isolated candles, each one unaware of the others, spread too far apart to see. This version of the universe is lonely in a specific and unusual way. Not the loneliness of being the only thing, but the loneliness of being one of the first things, of arriving before the gathering has begun, of being early in a way that cannot be resolved by patience alone, because the timescales involved are longer than civilizations tend to last. There is something almost unbearable about this version. It means the universe will eventually be full of minds, billions of years from now, long after our sun has exhausted its fuel and our solar system has gone cold. Civilizations may arise and flourish and fill the galaxy with conversation. The universe we will never see may be the one we most wanted to find. We are simply here too soon. The party has not started yet, and we may not survive until it does. Whether that is more comforting or more devastating than the alternatives is a question each person has to answer for themselves. The third possibility is that we are ordinary, one of countless civilizations that arose through the same arc. Curiosity, fire, mathematics, agriculture, industry, the extraordinary cleverness that produces vaccines and nuclear weapons from the same underlying knowledge, the institutions that try to hold it all together and sometimes succeed and sometimes do not. In this version, the galaxy has seen this story before, many times, and most of those stories ended before their civilizations became detectable across interstellar distances. Not always in catastrophe, perhaps in slow decline, perhaps in transformation into something post-biological that does not communicate in ways we would recognize, perhaps in a kind of quiet obsolescence that leaves no readable trace. The ruins may be out there, too old to read, too weathered by geological time to distinguish from natural formations. The signals may have passed through our solar system millions of years ago, before we had the instruments to detect them, and there may be no more coming. In this version, we are not first, and we will not be last, but we are one among many, and the silence is simply what the universe sounds like when the lifetimes of civilizations are short compared to the distances between them. Each of these answers is, in its own way, terrifying. The first says we are alone, and the responsibility is staggering. The second says we are early, and the isolation is structural and unresolvable. The third says we are ordinary, and the odds suggest we will follow the same arc as everything that came before us. None of them can be ruled out. None of them can be confirmed. We are working, as we almost always are when we ask the deepest questions, with evidence that is thin and a question that is enormous. What we can say, what the evidence actually supports, is this: whatever we are, it is not common. Think about the chain that produced us. Hydrogen, the simplest element, forged in the first minutes after the Big Bang. That hydrogen collapses into stars. The stars forge heavier elements in their cores. When those stars die, they scatter those elements into space. Those elements collapse into new stars with rocky planets. On one of those planets, chemistry assembles into the first replicating molecule. That molecule evolves over billions of years into single cells, then complex cells through a one-time merger, then multicellular life, then nervous systems, then brains capable of modeling the world with enough fidelity to develop language and science, and the ability to look back up at the hydrogen this all began with and understand in partial and growing detail what it is. That chain is almost impossibly long. It is almost impossibly fragile. It required billions of years and billions of contingencies, each one dependent on the last, none of them guaranteed. It produced us. Think of the crow dropping stones into a tube and watching the water rise. Think of the octopus carrying a coconut shell across the ocean floor against a future need. Think of the chimpanzee sitting at the waterfall, watching something it cannot eat or use or explain, watching it anyway. These are the things on this planet that come closest to what we are. They hint at the early shape of the trajectory that produced us, and they are separated from us by millions of years of divergence and the full weight of cumulative culture. The distance between us and whatever might be on the other side of the cosmic gulf, if anything is, may be larger still, or smaller. Or the gulf may be, in the most meaningful sense, empty. We do not know. But here is something we do know, and it is worth sitting with before the question closes. We are the first species on this planet to look up and ask the question at all. Not the first to feel wonder. The chimpanzee at the waterfall suggests that wonder is older than we are. We were the first to take that wonder, build instruments out of it, point those instruments at the sky, and seriously attempt an answer. The first to discover that the universe has a history that can be read, that stars have life cycles, that galaxies exist beyond our own, that the universe had a beginning and will have something that functions like an end. Whatever the silence means, whether we are alone or early or one of many that did not make it, we are the first thing on this planet to understand the scale of what we are inside. That is not nothing. It may, in fact, be everything. What we know is this. The universe spent 13 billion years building the conditions for a question to be asked, not for any particular answer to be reached, just for the question itself to exist, for something to pull itself out of the physics and chemistry and biology of an ordinary planet and look outward into the dark and wonder whether it is the only thing out there doing exactly that. That wondering is what we are. The silence does not diminish it. It may be what makes it the largest thing in the known universe. The universe had 13 billion years to produce something that could ask this question. It produced us. Whether that makes us precious, or alone, or both, may in the end be the same thing.